Kelthrick stood before the viewing screen in his quarters, watching the blue and green planet grow larger as his transport vessel approached human space. His upper sensors twitched with what other species might call nervousness, though Valorans prided themselves on being beyond such primitive emotions. The assignment had come directly from High Command. Observe the humans, document their military capabilities, determine if they were worthy of a formal defense alliance with the Valoran Empire, simple enough tasks for someone of his experience and training. He pulled up the files again on his data tablet. Humanity had arrived in the galactic community only 70 years ago, yet they had already fought 3 major conflicts and won each one. The reports seemed exaggerated. Humans defeated the Zarkov Raiders in 6 months, when most species needed years. They broke the siege of Station Gamma despite being outnumbered 10-1. They even forced the proud Thalnir Confederation to sign a peace treaty after just 2 battles. Kelthrix made a note in his report. Human claims required verification. The galaxy was full of species who boasted about their military strength. Real warriors proved themselves through logic and strategy, not wild stories. The comm panel chimed. A human face appeared on the screen, showing too many teeth in what their species called a smile. The gesture still made Kelthrix uncomfortable after weeks of studying human expressions. "Kelthrix, right?" the human said. "I'm Jake Morrison, your liaison officer. We'll be docking in 20 minutes. Hope you brought comfortable shoes because we've got a lot of walking to do." "I do not wear shoes," Kelthrix replied, "and I prefer to begin official observations immediately upon arrival." Jake laughed, a sound that seemed too loud for the situation. "All business, huh? That's fine. Though you might want to grab some rest first. The Crithian swarm has been moving ships near the outer rim. We might see action sooner than expected." The screen went dark before Kelthrix could respond. He added another note to his report. Humans displayed concerning lack of proper military protocol. Jake Morrison had not used his rank or shown appropriate deference to a foreign observer of superior status. The transport docked with the human station called Gateway 7. Kelthrix gathered his equipment and made his way to the airlock. The doors opened with a hiss, and he stepped into what could only be described as organized chaos. Human military personnel moved in every direction. Some wore the dark blue uniforms of their naval forces. Others had the gray combat gear of their marine divisions. They talked and laughed with each other, making more noise than an entire Valoran command deck. Several humans were eating food while walking, which violated at least 6 regulations in Valoran military code. Jake Morrison waited at the bottom of the ramp. He wore a casual duty uniform and carried a small bag over one shoulder. "Welcome to Gateway 7. Not much to look at, but it's home for 30,000 personnel." "Your security seems inadequate," Kelthrix observed. "I see no weapon scanners or identity verification stations." "Oh, those are there. You just can't see them." Jake started walking, and Kelthrix followed. "Everything in this corridor is scanning you right now. If you were a threat, you'd already have 50 Marines on your position." They passed a common area where off-duty humans gathered around tables. Kelthrix noticed something odd on one of the walls. Photographs, dozens of them, showing humans in various locations and situations. "Why do your personnel display personal images in a military facility?" Jake glanced at the wall. "Those are memorial photos. Soldiers we've lost in the last 5 years. We keep them up so we remember why we're here." "That seems emotionally counterproductive," Kelthrix said. "Valoran military doctrine recommends processing loss through meditation and moving forward with renewed focus. Different species, different ways." Jake pulled a small photograph from his pocket and showed it to Kelthrix. It displayed 4 humans in combat gear, arms around each other's shoulders. "These were my squad mates on Rigel Prime. 3 of them didn't make it home. I carry this to remind myself what we're fighting for." Kelthrix examined the image. The humans looked young, barely past their maturity stage. "You knew them personally?" Fought beside them for 2 years. Saved my life more times than I could count. Jake put the photo away. That's how humans work. We don't just serve together. We become family. They took a transit car to the military wing of the station. Through the windows, Kelthrick saw human warships docked in neat rows. The vessels looked solid and functional, though lacking the elegant design of Valoran cruisers. Everything about human military equipment seemed built for one purpose: surviving damage and hitting back harder. The transit car stopped at a command center. Inside, dozens of humans worked at various stations, monitoring screens filled with tactical data. At the center of the room stood a human female with short blonde hair and a uniform marked with captain's insignia. "Captain Lisa Hayes," Jake said. "She commands the battlecruiser Defiance. Captain, this is Kelthrix from the Valoran Empire." Lisa Hayes turned and offered her hand. Another human gesture Kelthrix had learned meant greeting. He touched her palm briefly with his own appendage. Her grip was firm, almost aggressive. "Glad to have you aboard," Lisa said, "though I'll be honest, we might be throwing you into the deep end. Intel reports the swarm is massing ships near Halcyon 7. If they attack the mining colony there, we're going in." "Standard protocol would suggest gathering more information before committing forces," Kelthrix said. Lisa smiled, but this one showed no warmth. "Standard protocol doesn't mean much when civilians are about to die. We go in fast, hit hard, and bring everyone home. That's the human way. Even if tactical analysis suggests high casualty rates?" "Especially then." Lisa turned back to her command screen. "Jake, get our guest settled in. I want him on the Defiance before the end of the day. If the swarm makes a move, I want Kelthrix to see exactly what humans do when someone threatens innocent people." As they left the command center, Kelthrix noticed something in Lisa's voice that concerned him. It was not fear or hesitation. It was anticipation, almost eagerness. These humans seemed to want the coming fight. Jake led him through more corridors, pointing out various facilities and introducing him to personnel. Everyone they met seemed friendly, but also watchful. Kelthrix realized the humans were studying him just as he studied them. They reached his assigned quarters, a small room with basic furniture and a large window showing the stars beyond. Jake handed him a data pad with his access codes and schedule. "Get some rest," Jake said. "Things might get exciting soon." "You seem pleased by the prospect of combat," Kelthrix observed. Jake's expression became serious for the first time since they met. "Not pleased. Ready? There's a difference. We don't look for fights, but we don't run from them either. You'll understand soon enough." The bridge of the Defiance hummed with activity as Kelthrix took his position at the observation station. Human crew members moved with practiced efficiency, calling out reports and confirming orders. Captain Lisa Hayes stood at the center of it all, watching the tactical display with focused intensity. "Swarm ships confirmed in Halcyon 7 system," a young human male reported from the sensor station. "Count is at 47 vessels and rising. They're positioning around the mining colony." "Colony status?" Lisa asked. "Evacuating personnel to underground shelters. Population is 2,300, mostly miners and their families. They've got maybe 30 minutes before the swarm reaches effective weapon range." Kelthrix checked his own instruments. The numbers confirmed what the human sensor officer reported, but they also showed something else. The human fleet in this sector consisted of only 12 ships. The Valoran support vessels numbered another 5. Against 47 swarm craft, the logical response was clear. "Captain Hayes," Kelthrix said, "tactical analysis suggests withdrawing to defensive positions and requesting reinforcements. The numerical disadvantage is too severe." Lisa glanced at him, and Kelthrix saw something in her eyes that made his sensors twitch again. "How long would it take to get reinforcements here?" "Approximately 6 hours." "And how many miners would be alive by then?" Kelthrix ran the calculations. The swarm did not take prisoners. They consumed biological matter to fuel their expansion. Probability of survivor recovery after 6 hours is less than 3%. Then we go now. Lisa turned to her communications officer. Signal the fleet. Attack formation Delta. Tell Commander Walsh to prep the fighter squadrons. We're going in hot. Jake Morrison appeared at Kelthrix's side, carrying a combat helmet under one arm. You might want to grab onto something. This is going to get rough. The Defiance and the rest of the human fleet accelerated toward Halcyon 7. Kelthrix watched the tactical display as the distance closed between the human ships and the swarm vessels. Standard military doctrine called for careful positioning, establishing firing solutions, and coordinated strikes. The humans were simply charging directly at the enemy. "Fighter squadrons away!" someone called out. On the display, small dots separated from the human cruisers. Kelthrix counted 32 fighters launching into space. They formed up into groups of 4 and dove straight toward the swarm formation. "That's Ryan Clark's squadron in the lead," Jake said, pointing at one group of fighters. "Best pilot in the fleet. Watch what he does." The lead fighter group approached the swarm vessels at speeds that seemed dangerously fast. Kelthrix expected them to break off and establish attack runs. Instead, they flew directly between 2 swarm cruisers, so close that their shields must have been overlapping. "Insane," Kelthrix whispered. "Effective," Jake corrected. "The swarm ships can't fire without hitting each other. Ryan's using their formations against them." The fighters released their weapons at point-blank range, then spiraled away in patterns that defied standard flight physics. Explosions bloomed across 2 swarm vessels. The fighter pilots were already targeting their next objectives before the first ships finished breaking apart. "All ships, fire at will," Lisa commanded. The Defiance shuddered as its weapon systems opened fire. Beams of energy and kinetic projectiles crossed the space between the fleets. Swarm vessels returned fire, and the human ships took hits that made their shields flare bright. "Shields at 70%, reported the tactical officer. "Keep us moving," Lisa said calmly. "Don't give them a stable target." The Defiance rolled and twisted through space in ways that Valoran cruisers could never match. Kelthrix felt his internal organs shift with each maneuver. Humans apparently designed their ships to withstand forces that would incapacitate most species. On the display, one of the human frigates took heavy damage. Its shields collapsed, and weapons fire tore into the hull. Kelthrix marked it as a loss in his mental calculations. "Frigate Valor is venting atmosphere," the communications officer reported. "Get me Captain Brennan," Lisa ordered. A human face appeared on the screen, covered in blood from a head wound. Behind him, smoke and sparks filled what remained of his bridge. "Still here, Captain. Ship's dead, but the crew's alive." "Can you make the colony?" "We've got engines for about 10 more minutes. Should be enough." "Good. Emergency evac at the colony, then scuttle the Valor on my mark." "I want that wreck to land right on top of the swarm's landing zone." The wounded captain smiled. "Understood. It'll make one hell of a roadblock." Kelthrix struggled to process what he was hearing. "You are planning to crash your own ship?" "Can't let it be salvaged," Jake explained. "And if we're going to lose it anyway, might as well make it count." The battle continued around them. Human fighters darted between swarm vessels like insects, too fast and unpredictable to hit effectively. The larger human ships concentrated their fire on swarm cruisers, working together to overwhelm shields and punch through armor. "Ground assault teams away," Lisa announced. On another screen, Kelthrix saw transport shuttles launching from the human ships. They streaked toward the planet's surface while the space battle raged above them. "You are sending soldiers to the surface while we are still engaged?" Kelthrix asked. "Can't wait for the space battle to finish," Jake said. "The swarm already has forces on the ground. Our Marines need to protect the evacuation." One of the transport shuttles took a direct hit from a swarm weapon. It spun out of control, trailing debris and flame. Kelthrix marked it as another casualty. Then the shuttle righted itself, still flying despite the massive damage to its hull. "Transport 4 reports hull breach, but engines functional," the communications officer said. "Sergeant Katie Palmer says they're still going in." Lisa nodded as if this was expected. "Tell her to keep her people safe." The view screen switched to show the planet's surface. Kelthrix watched as the damaged transport crashed into the ground near the mining colony, plowing a trench through the dirt before finally stopping. The rear hatch blew open, and human Marines poured out, weapons ready. They wore bulky armor and carried weapons that looked too heavy for their size. Swarm drones rushed toward them across the open ground, but the Marines formed a defensive line and opened fire. The sound of their weapons carried through the audio feed, a constant thunder that never seemed to stop. "Contact front," a female voice said over the comm. That must be Sergeant Palmer. "We've got maybe 200 drones between us and the colony. Weapons free, stay together, nobody does anything stupid." The Marines advanced toward the colony despite the overwhelming enemy numbers. They moved in coordinated groups, covering each other as they fought. When one Marine fell, 2 others would drag them to safety while the rest maintained fire. Kelthrix noticed something strange. The human soldiers were not fighting silently like Valoran troops. They shouted to each other, called out warnings, even made jokes between firing their weapons. It seemed chaotic and undisciplined, yet somehow it worked. "Multiple swarm drop pods incoming," someone warned. On the screen, more swarm forces landed near the colony. The drones were trying to surround the human position. Standard military tactics would suggest falling back to a more defensible location. "Push forward," Sergeant Palmer ordered. "We don't let them get close to those civilians." The Marines charged. They actually ran toward the enemy, firing as they moved. Some fell to swarm weapons, but the others kept going. Kelthrix watched in shock as human soldiers used their own bodies to shield injured comrades, taking hits that should have been fatal. In space, the battle was turning. The human fleet had destroyed or disabled 20 swarm vessels, though at heavy cost. 2 human frigates were gone, and most of the remaining ships showed significant damage. The fighters had lost 8 of their original 32, yet the survivors continued their attacks without hesitation. "Ryan Clark's squadron is Winchester," Jake said, noting that the fighters had expended all their ammunition. "They're returning to rearm." But on the display, Kelthrix saw the fighters were not returning to their carriers. Instead, they positioned themselves between the swarm ships and the planet, using their own vessels as shields for the transports below. "They have no weapons," Kelthrix said. "Why do they remain in position?" "Because the swarm might target the evacuation shuttles," Jake replied simply. "The fighters will stay there until they're either shot down or relieved. That's what we do." On the planet's surface, the Marines had reached the colony entrance. Civilians poured into the transport shuttles, families carrying children and grabbing whatever possessions they could. The Marines held the perimeter, their weapons cutting down any swarm drone that got close. "Last shuttle is loading," Sergeant Palmer reported. Her voice sounded strained. "We've got wounded who can't move fast enough. Need 2 more minutes." "You've got it," Lisa said. She turned to her weapons officer. "Target every swarm position near the colony. Full spread, danger close." "Captain, that's within 50 meters of our own people. They know the risk. Fire." The Defiance's weapons lit up the planet's surface around the colony. Explosions tore through swarm formations, buying the Marines precious seconds. Kelthrix saw 2 human soldiers caught in the blast radius, thrown by the concussion. "Last shuttle away," Sergeant Palmer called out. "All civilians secure. Marine casualties at 18. We're coming home." The human ships began pulling back, their objective complete. The swarm tried to pursue, but they had lost too many vessels. The remaining swarm cruisers regrouped and slowly withdrew from the system. Silence fell over the bridge of the Defiance. Captain Lisa Hayes remained standing, watching the tactical display until every swarm ship had left sensor range. Then she allowed herself to sit. "Damage report," she said quietly. The reports came in. 2 frigates lost with all hands, multiple ships heavily damaged, fighter losses at 8, marine casualties at 18 dead, 43 wounded. The colony had lost 20 civilians who could not reach the shelters in time. Kelthrix did his own calculations. The humans had suffered nearly 300 casualties total, yet they had saved over 2,000 civilians and driven off a force that outnumbered them 4-1. Jake looked at him. "Well, what does your analysis say?" Kelthrix reviewed everything he had witnessed: the reckless charges, the refusal to retreat, the willingness to crash their own ships and stand in weapons fire to protect others. It all violated every principle of logical warfare he had ever learned. "You should have lost," he said finally. "By every tactical model, you should have been destroyed." "But we weren't," Lisa said. "You want to know why? Because we don't fight like you do. We don't calculate acceptable losses or run probability scenarios. We fight for each other, and we don't stop until everyone." 3 days after the battle at Halcyon 7, Kelthrix sat in the observation deck of the Defiance, reviewing his reports. His findings troubled him. The humans had demonstrated capabilities that seemed to defy logical military science. Their losses should have broken their morale, yet the crew around him seemed more determined than ever. Jake Morrison found him there, carrying 2 containers of what humans called coffee. He offered one to Kelthrix, who politely declined. Humans consumed vast quantities of this bitter liquid, claiming it helped them stay alert during long duty shifts. "You've been quiet since the battle," Jake said, sitting down. "Having trouble with your report?" "I am having trouble explaining how your species survives," Kelthrix admitted. "Your tactics are inefficient. Your emotional responses should impair decision-making, yet you achieve results that superior forces cannot match." "Maybe that's because we're not trying to be efficient," Jake replied. "We're trying to win, and we're willing to pay the price for it." Before Kelthrix could respond, the alarm systems activated throughout the ship. Red lights flashed in the corridors, and a calm voice announced battle stations over the speakers. Jake was on his feet immediately, the relaxed expression gone from his face. "What's happening?" Kelthrix asked. "Find out soon enough. Come on." They rushed to the bridge where Captain Lisa Hayes was already receiving reports. The main screen showed a star system with a large green and blue planet at its center. New harvest, according to the navigation display. Population 3 million, mostly agricultural workers and their families. "Swarm fleet jumping in," the sensor officer called out. "First wave is 60 ships, second wave right behind them. Count is now 90. Now 120. They're not stopping, Captain." Lisa's expression remained calm, but Kelthrix noticed her hands gripping the edge of her command station. "How long until they reach the planet?" 4 hours at current speed." "Time to evacuate 3 million people?" "Impossible, ma'am. We'd need at least 3 days with every transport we have." Kelthrix quickly accessed the tactical network. The combined human and Valoran fleet in this sector numbered 31 vessels. Against over 120 swarm ships, the outcome was mathematically certain. They would lose. "Captain Hayes," Kelthrix said carefully, "I must recommend immediate retreat. This force cannot hold against such numbers. We should withdraw and preserve our ships for a counterattack once reinforcements arrive." Lisa turned to look at him. "How many reinforcements would we need?" "At least 100 additional vessels, perhaps more." "And how long would that take?" 5 days, maybe 6. "So your plan is to abandon 3 million people for almost a week, while we gather enough ships to maybe take back their planet?" Lisa's voice remained level, but Kelthrix heard steel beneath the words. "What do you think the swarm will do to those people in 6 days?" Kelthrix knew the answer. The swarm consumed biological matter. 3 million humans would become fuel for their expansion. The losses would be total. Then we're not retreating. Lisa activated the fleet-wide communication channel. All ships, this is Hayes. You all see what we're facing. Nobody would blame you for pulling back. This is going to be the fight of our lives, and some of us aren't going to see the end of it. But there are 3 million people down there who need us. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to buy them time. Every minute we hold the swarm off is another 1,000 people in shelters, another 100 shuttles launched, another family that might survive. I know what I'm asking. I know the cost, but if we don't stand here, nobody will. All ships confirm status. One by one, the human ships responded. Every captain confirmed ready status. Even the Valoran vessels. Though Kelthrix noticed their acknowledgments came with careful hesitation. We should at least establish defensive positions, Kelthrix suggested. Create a perimeter and force them to attack our prepared lines. No time, Jake said. The swarm will split their forces. Some will engage us while others go straight for the planet. We need to hit them before they organize. That is suicide. Maybe. But it's our choice to make. The fleet moved out, accelerating toward the approaching swarm vessels. Kelthrix watched the numbers on his display with growing dread. The enemy outnumbered them 4-1. Standard combat models predicted complete human defeat within 90 minutes. The first engagement began at extreme range. Human ships opened fire while still thousands of kilometers from the swarm, forcing the enemy to slow and adjust their formations. It was a delaying tactic, nothing more, but every second counted. Sir, the communications officer said to Captain Hayes, we're getting reports from the planet. Evacuation is underway but moving too slow. The shelters can hold maybe 500,000 people. Everyone else needs to be off-world before the swarm lands. Tell them we're buying them all the time we can, Lisa replied. The fleets clashed. Swarm vessels surrounded the human ships, trying to use their numbers to overwhelm the defenders. Human crews fought with desperate intensity, their weapons never ceasing. Kelthrix watched as the battle became a chaotic melee, ships of both sides interweaving in patterns that defied tactical sense. A transmission came through from the planet's surface. This is Corporal Ben Turner, Combat Engineer Corps. We've got a problem down here. The main evacuation center is taking swarm fire. Transport ships can't land safely. Lisa studied the tactical display. Can you clear the landing zone? Not with what we've got. The swarm dropped heavy weapons. We need support. Sending what we can. Hold position. She turned to her weapons officer. Target the surface coordinates. Precision strikes only. Our people are danger close. Ma'am, the swarm ships are targeting us. If we divert power to surface bombardment, our shields will weaken. Do it anyway. The Defiance shuddered as multiple swarm weapons struck the hull. Warning lights flashed across the bridge. But the weapons officer maintained fire on the surface targets. Kelthrix saw the shields drop to critical levels before stabilizing. On the planet, Corporal Ben Turner and his engineering team worked frantically. They had converted construction equipment into improvised weapons, using mining explosives to create barriers and traps. It was crude and inefficient, yet somehow effective against the swarm drones. Got an idea? Turner said over the comm. It's crazy, but crazy seems to be working today. Can you drop a load of mining equipment right on top of the swarm position? The heavy stuff? The kind with fusion cores? You want me to bomb them with construction equipment? Lisa asked. Yes, ma'am. Those cores will go critical on impact. Should clear about a square kilometer. Civilian equipment? Beats dying. Ma'am. Lisa authorized it. Cargo ships in orbit released their loads, and massive pieces of mining machinery fell toward the planet. They struck the swarm positions and detonated, creating explosions that lit up the surface. The landing zone cleared, and transport ships rushed in to grab evacuees. In space, the battle was going badly. 5 human ships had been destroyed, and most of the survivors showed heavy damage. The swarm pressed their advantage, surrounding isolated vessels and tearing them apart with concentrated fire. "We're losing," Jake said quietly. "At this rate, we won't last another hour." Kelthrix checked his own calculations and confirmed the assessment. The human fleet was being systematically destroyed, yet nobody was retreating. Every ship fought with everything they had, buying minutes with their lives. A new voice came over the communications channel. "This is Dr. Amy Chen at the field hospital. I know everyone's busy, but we need evacuation. The swarm is closing on our position." "Transport ships are all committed to civilian evac," someone replied. "Can you move the patients?" "Half of them are critical. They won't survive transport without medical support." There was a long pause. Then Amy spoke again, and her voice was steady. "Understood. We'll hold here as long as we can. Tell the families their loved ones fought hard." Kelthrix felt something he had not experienced before while watching the tactical display. The humans were not just fighting to win. They were fighting to protect each other, even when victory was impossible. "Belay that," Lisa said firmly. "Amy, I need 20 minutes. Can you give me 20 minutes? We've got blast doors and about a dozen Marines with us. We'll make it work." Lisa turned to her tactical officer. "I need a path to that hospital. I don't care what's in the way. Find me a path." "Captain, if we break formation, the swarm will cut us off from the rest of the fleet. Then we fight alone. I'm not leaving wounded soldiers behind." The Defiance turned and dove toward the planet, cutting through swarm formations. Weapons fire hammered the shields, but the ship kept moving. Other human vessels saw what Lisa was doing and moved to support, creating a corridor through the enemy fleet. They reached low orbit above the hospital. The building was surrounded by swarm forces, the defensive perimeter shrinking by the minute. Lisa ordered precision strikes that walked along the enemy line, driving them back just enough. Transport shuttles launched from the Defiance, protected by fighter cover. They landed at the hospital under heavy fire, loaded the wounded and medical staff, then fought their way back to orbit. Kelthrix counted the seconds. 18 minutes. They had done it in 18 minutes, but the cost was severe. The Defiance had taken critical damage. 2 more human ships were destroyed, covering the rescue. The fleet was down to 23 effective vessels against over 80 swarm ships still in the fight. "All ships fall back to defensive pattern around the planet," Lisa ordered. "We make our stand here." Jake looked at Kelthrix. "This is where it gets bad." "Gets bad?" Kelthrix could not keep the disbelief from his voice. "Your fleet is nearly destroyed. You have lost hundreds of crew. The swarm will overrun your positions within the hour. How can it possibly get worse?" "Because we're not done fighting," Jake said. "Not even close. Watch what happens when humans have nothing left to lose." On the tactical display, the remaining human ships formed a tight defensive formation around New Harvest. The swarm fleet moved in for the kill, confident in their overwhelming numbers. But Captain Lisa Hayes was typing commands into her console, and Kelthrix saw a new designation appear on the tactical network: Protocol Nightmare. He did not know what it meant, but the human crews seemed to understand immediately. Every human ship began charging weapons that should have required hours to power up. They were diverting everything, including life support and shields, into offensive systems. Kelthrix realized with growing, the bridge of the Defiance went quiet as every crew member prepared for what was coming. Kelthrix gripped his observation station, his sensors reading the massive energy buildups throughout the human fleet. They were really going to do it. They were going to turn themselves into missiles and charge directly at the swarm. "All ships report ready," the communications officer said quietly. Captain Lisa Hayes stood at her command station, watching the swarm fleet approach on the main display. Her face showed no fear, only grim determination. "Helmsman, plot intercept course. All ahead full. Target the biggest ship you can find." "Yes, ma'am." Jake Morrison moved to stand beside Kelthrix. You should probably secure yourself. This is going to get rough. Your captain is committing suicide, Kelthrix said. You will all die. Maybe, Jake replied. But we'll take a lot of them with us, and we'll buy enough time for those 3 million people down there. The Defiance accelerated, and the other human ships followed. They abandoned all defensive tactics and simply charged forward. The swarm fleet, confused by this unexpected maneuver, hesitated for precious seconds before opening fire. Then something unexpected happened. The communications panel lit up with incoming signals. Captain Hayes, this is Commander Nina Rodriguez of the 5th Fleet. Hope we're not too late to the party. On the tactical display, new contacts appeared at the edge of the system. Human warships, dozens of them, jumping in from faster-than-light travel. Kelthrix counted 43 vessels, all of them moving at speeds that should have been impossible. Nina? Lisa's voice showed surprise for the first time. You're 3 days early. Your fleet wasn't due here until Friday. Yeah, well, we broke a few rules getting here. Pushed the engines past safety limits, skipped about half the normal jump calculations, and may have permanently damaged our faster-than-light drives. Command is going to be pissed, but we figured you needed us more than we needed working engines. Fresh human ships crashed into the swarm formation from behind. The enemy fleet, already committed to their attack on Lisa's ships, found themselves trapped between two forces. The battle transformed from a desperate last stand into a chaotic free-for-all. Jake was grinning despite the danger. Nina Rodriguez. That woman has more guts than sense. She must have pushed her engines to 80% over maximum. That should destroy the ships, Kelthrix said. Probably did, but she got here, and that's what matters. The reinforcements changed everything. The swarm fleet, which had been confident in their numerical advantage, suddenly found themselves outnumbered and surrounded. Human ships attacked from all directions, coordinating their fire with deadly efficiency. Captain, we're receiving transmission from the swarm hive nodes, the communications officer reported. It's odd. The signal seems distorted. Put it through. The bridge filled with the sound of the swarm's hive communication. Kelthrix had heard it before during previous encounters. It was normally a harmonious coordination signal, thousands of minds thinking as one. But this time, the signal was different. It was chaotic, discordant. They're broadcasting fear, Jake said quietly. I've never heard that before. The swarm do not experience fear, Kelthrix insisted. They are a hive mind. Individual survival is irrelevant to them. Then explain that signal. Kelthrix could not explain it. The swarm was transmitting something that resembled distress, as if the collective intelligence was experiencing an emotion it had no framework to process. The humans were doing something impossible. They were making the swarm afraid. On the planet's surface, the evacuation continued. Transport ships fled the atmosphere loaded with civilians while human fighters provided cover. Corporal Ben Turner's engineering teams had created improvised defensive positions using destroyed swarm equipment, turning the enemy's own weapons against them. In orbit, the battle reached its peak intensity. Lieutenant Commander Chris Walsh, the Defiance's weapons officer, unleashed every system the ship possessed. Kelthrix noticed some of the weapons were using technology he did not recognize. Energy beams that seemed to tear apart molecular bonds. Projectiles that created localized gravity wells on impact, weapons that should not exist according to galactic conventions. What are those weapons? Kelthrix demanded. Jake hesitated before answering. Special projects. We've been developing them specifically for the swarm. Most of them violate about 6 different interstellar treaties. You built illegal weapons? We built weapons that work. The swarm doesn't care about treaties, so why should we limit ourselves fighting them? It was logical, Kelthrix had to admit, though the implications troubled him. Humans were willing to break galactic law to protect their people. What else would they do if pushed far enough? The human ships fought with a ferocity that shocked Kelthrix. They did not just shoot at the swarm vessels. They hunted them. Human fighters pursued damaged swarm ships across the battlefield, ensuring kills. Human cruisers coordinated their fire to eliminate threats in order of priority. Even damaged human vessels that could barely maneuver continued fighting, using whatever weapons still functioned. "Swarm fleet is breaking formation," the sensor officer reported. "Multiple ships attempting to disengage." "Don't let them," Lisa ordered. "Pursuit pattern. I want every swarm ship accounted for." The human fleet gave chase. Kelthrix watched as the hunters became the hunted, swarm vessels desperately trying to escape while human ships ran them down one by one. It was not just a victory, it was a massacre. Jake touched his earpiece, listening to reports from the marine channels. "Ground forces report the swarm is retreating from the surface. They're abandoning their positions and trying to reach their ships." "They want to leave," Kelthrix said, understanding dawning. "They are experiencing fear and trying to flee." "First time for everything," Jake replied, but Captain Lisa Hayes was not finished. "All ships, target the swarm command vessels. Those are the ones with the hive coordinators. Take them out, and the rest will scatter." The human fleet concentrated fire on 6 massive swarm ships that served as central hubs for their collective intelligence. These vessels had thick armor and powerful shields, designed to survive any assault. Against the focused fury of the human fleet, they lasted less than 15 minutes. When the first command vessel exploded, something remarkable happened. The remaining swarm ships stopped coordinating. They began moving independently, each one trying to escape without regard for the others. The hive mind was fracturing. "They're panicking," Jake said with satisfaction. "Without the command ships, they can't think collectively anymore. They're just individual ships trying to survive." The battle became a rout. Swarm vessels fled in all directions, abandoning their damaged comrades and racing for the edge of the system. Human ships pursued, destroying stragglers and crippling ships that tried to fight back. On the planet, the last transport shuttles lifted off with evacuees. The casualty count was still being tallied, but early reports suggested they had saved over 2.5 million people. The cost had been severe. 10 human ships destroyed, 15 more heavily damaged, and hundreds of crew killed or wounded. But they had won. Kelthrix sat at his station, trying to process what he had witnessed. The swarm had never retreated before. In centuries of galactic conflict, they had always pressed forward regardless of losses. But humans had done something that superior technology and greater numbers could not accomplish. They had broken the swarm's will to fight. "Beginning damage assessment," someone reported. "Multiple hull breaches on decks 4 through 7. Casualties are coming in. Medical teams are overwhelmed." "Redirect personnel from non-essential stations," Lisa ordered. "Everyone helps with the wounded." Jake turned to Kelthrix. "Come on, even observers can carry stretchers." They left the bridge and entered a scene of controlled chaos. Injured crew members filled the corridors, some walking on their own, others being carried by their comrades. Medical personnel moved between them, triaging wounds and directing the worst cases to the ship's medical bay. Kelthrix helped carry a young human male who had severe burns across his arms and chest. The human stayed conscious, even managing to joke with the medical staff about the new scars he would have. "How can you find humor in this?" Kelthrix asked. The wounded human smiled weakly. "Because we won. Because I'm alive. And because the people down there are safe. That's worth a few burns." They delivered the patient to the medical bay, where Dr. Amy Chen and her team worked frantically to save lives. She had dark circles under her eyes and blood on her uniform, but her hands remained steady as she treated each patient. Jake led Kelthrix to a viewing port where they could see the planet below. Transport ships continued to arrive in orbit, bringing the evacuated civilians to the fleet's larger vessels. Families reunited. Children pressed their faces against windows, looking at the stars for the first time in their lives. "This is why we fight," Jake said quietly. "Not for glory or conquest, not to prove we're stronger than anyone else. We fight because those people down there deserve to live. Because every life matters. Because walking away and calling it acceptable losses is something we refuse to do." Kelthrix finally understood. Human warfare was not about tactical superiority or efficient resource management. It was personal. Every civilian saved was a victory. Every soldier lost was a tragedy. They carried the weight of each decision, each casualty, each desperate choice. And somehow, that weight made them stronger instead of breaking them. "Your species is dangerous," Kelthrix said. "Yes," Jake agreed. "You break rules. You take risks that should destroy you. You fight with emotions that should impair your judgment." Also, yes. "And yet you win, not just survive, but actually win against superior forces." Jake looked at him. "That's because we're not trying to survive. We're trying to protect. There's a difference. Survival is about saving yourself. Protection is about saving others. And humans will do anything to protect what we care about." On the main display, the last swarm ship jumped to faster-than-light speeds and disappeared. The battle was over. New Harvest was safe. The cost had been terrible, but the alternative would have been unthinkable. Captain Lisa Hayes appeared on the ship-wide communication channel. "All hands, this is the captain. Stand down from combat stations. Damage control teams continue your work. Everyone else, take a moment. Look around you. See the person next to you. Remember that we did this together. Remember why we're out here. And remember the ones who didn't make it back. They gave everything so others could live. That's the price of being human. That's the price we pay gladly." Kelthrix returned to his quarters and sat down to write his report. His appendages trembled as he typed. He had witnessed something profound, something that challenged everything his species believed about warfare and military doctrine. Humans were dangerous. Not because they were strong or numerous. Not because their technology was superior. They were dangerous because they refused to accept defeat. Because 5 days after the battle, Kelthrix stood in the memorial garden that had been set up on New Harvest. The humans had insisted on holding a service for their fallen before returning to their home systems. Thousands of people gathered in the open field, both military personnel and civilians who owed their lives to the sacrifice of others. The garden was simple, rows of markers, each one bearing the name of a human who had died defending the planet. Fresh flowers covered the ground, placed by grateful colonists. Children drew pictures and left them at the markers, their artwork showing crude representations of human ships protecting the world below. Jake Morrison found Kelthrix standing before one particular marker. The name read Ryan Clark, Lieutenant, Fighter Squadron Leader, age 26. "He was one of the best," Jake said quietly. "Made it through the whole battle. Then his damaged fighter failed during landing, and he didn't make it out." He placed a photo next to the marker, showing a young human male with a bright smile. "He always wanted to fly. Since he was a kid, that was all he talked about." Kelthrix had been reviewing casualty lists for days. 217 humans dead, 493 wounded, against over 2.5 million saved. The mathematics were clear. It was a victory by any measure. Yet the humans mourned their losses with a depth of emotion that made Kelthrix uncomfortable. "Why do you grieve so intensely?" Kelthrix asked. "You achieved your objective. The casualties were within acceptable ranges for the situation." Jake turned to look at him, and Kelthrix saw anger flash across his face. "Acceptable ranges? These were people, Kelthrix. They had families, dreams, lives they'll never get to live. Ryan was going to propose to his girlfriend next month. Now she has to live the rest of her life without him. How is that acceptable? I did not mean offense. I simply do not understand why you allow emotion to override logic. Because that's what makes us human, Jake replied. We feel things. We care about each other. And yes, sometimes that hurts like hell. But would you rather be like the swarm? No feelings, no connections, just cold calculation? Before Kelthrix could respond, the ceremony began. Captain Lisa Hayes stood at a podium before the assembled crowd. She wore her dress uniform, medals gleaming in the sunlight. But her face showed the weight of command, the burden of every decision that had led to this moment. We gather here to honor the fallen, Lisa said, her voice carrying across the silent field. 217 men and women who gave everything so that others could live. They came from different worlds, different backgrounds, different beliefs. But they shared one thing. They understood that some things are worth dying for. She paused, looking at the rows of markers. I knew most of them personally. I signed their transfer orders, approved their leave requests, attended their weddings, and celebrated their promotions. And I sent them into battle knowing some would not come back. That weight never gets easier to carry. It never should. The crowd remained silent. Even the children seemed to understand the solemnity of the moment. These people were not saints, Lisa continued. They were regular humans who chose to serve. They complained about duty shifts and terrible food. They made mistakes and had bad days. They were perfectly, wonderfully ordinary. And when the moment came, they did something extraordinary. They stood between innocent people and certain death. They fought when others would have fled. They held the line when the line seemed impossible to hold. Lisa's voice grew stronger. The swarm thought they could break us. They thought overwhelming numbers would force us to retreat. They were wrong. They did not understand that humans don't fight because we're fearless. We fight because we're terrified of what happens if we don't. We fight because those people behind us matter more than our own safety. She gestured to the crowd of colonists. 3 million lives. That's what these 217 people bought with their sacrifice. 3 million people who will see tomorrow because these brave souls were willing to see their last day. If you take nothing else from this moment, remember that. Remember that your life has value because someone thought it was worth dying for. The ceremony continued with personal stories, shared memories, and quiet tears. Kelthrix watched as humans comforted each other, held each other, and drew strength from their shared grief. It was inefficient and emotionally exhausting. It was also deeply human. After the ceremony, Jake took Kelthrix to the field hospital where the wounded were recovering. They found Dr. Amy Chen working with a young human female who had lost her legs in the battle. The doctor was fitting the woman with temporary prosthetics while explaining the advanced replacements she would receive at a proper medical facility. You'll be walking again in 6 weeks, Amy said encouragingly. Running in 3 months. Dancing by the end of the year. The wounded soldier smiled weakly. Will I be able to serve again? If you want to. Prosthetics these days are as good as the original, sometimes better. Then that's what I want, to serve. After the soldier was taken to recovery, Kelthrix approached Dr. Chen. She wants to return to military service after such trauma. This seems illogical. Amy looked tired, but patient. She wants to continue protecting people. That's not illogical. That's courage. Your species confuses me, Kelthrix admitted. You experience pain and loss, yet you continue to volunteer for service. You mourn your dead intensely, yet you return to situations where more will die. You break rules and take risks that should destroy you. How do you sustain this? Amy considered the question carefully. Because the alternative is worse. If we stop fighting, if we let fear control us, then the people who depend on us suffer. We've seen what happens when good people do nothing. The swarm conquers worlds. Pirates raid colonies. Dictators oppress their people. Someone has to stand up and say no. Someone has to be willing to fight, and if not us, then who? She gestured to the wounded soldiers around them. Every person in this room made a choice. They could have stayed home, stayed safe, lived comfortable lives. But they chose to serve. They chose to put themselves between danger and innocent people. That's not confusion or illogical thinking. That's humanity at its finest. That evening, Kelthrix was invited to a gathering in one of the ship's common areas. Human crew members had assembled to share food and stories. It was not an official function, just people coming together after trauma. Jake convinced Kelthrix to attend, insisting that he needed to see this aspect of human culture. The room was loud and chaotic. Humans laughed and talked, sharing memories of fallen comrades with a mix of sadness and celebration. They told funny stories about Ryan Clark's terrible jokes and Katie Palmer's legendary bad luck at cards. They remembered Ben Turner's strange habit of singing while working and how Amy Chen would curse in 3 languages when dealing with stubborn equipment. "Why do you celebrate?" Kelthrix asked Jake. "These people are dead. This seems disrespectful." "It's not disrespectful," Jake explained. "It's how we honor them. We remember the good times, the laughter, the moments that made life worth living. If we only mourned, we'd lose sight of why their lives mattered. This is how we keep them alive in memory." A young human female approached them, carrying 3 drinks. She handed one to Jake and offered another to Kelthrix, who politely declined again. "You're the Valoran observer, right? I'm Sarah. I served on the Valor before it went down." "You were on the ship that crashed," Kelthrix said. "Yet you survived." "Barely. Captain Brennan got most of us off before impact. He stayed on the bridge to pilot it in, made sure that wreck landed exactly where Captain Hayes needed it. He saved a lot of lives that day." "Do you regret serving?" Kelthrix asked. "Knowing the risks?" Sarah looked surprised by the question. "Regret? No. I'm sad we lost good people. I'm angry it had to happen. But I don't regret serving. I got to be part of something bigger than myself. I got to help save 3 million people. How many beings in this galaxy can say their life had that much meaning?" As the evening continued, Kelthrix observed the humans more closely. He noticed how they touched each other casually, how they laughed even when discussing serious topics, how they seemed to draw strength from simply being together. It was fundamentally different from Valoran gatherings, which were formal and structured. Humans were messy and emotional and illogical, and somehow it worked for them. Captain Lisa Hayes found him near the end of the evening. She carried a glass of something amber-colored and sat down beside him. "Jake tells me you're writing a report about us." "Yes. My government needs to understand human capabilities." "And what are you going to tell them?" Kelthrix considered his response carefully. "That humanity is dangerous. That your species fights with emotional intensity that defies conventional military doctrine. That you take risks that should result in failure but somehow lead to victory. That you value individual life over strategic advantage, that you turn weakness into strength." Lisa took a drink before responding. "That's fair. We are dangerous. But here's something you should add to your report. We're only dangerous to those who threaten what we care about. We don't conquer. We don't enslave. We don't destroy for the sake of destruction. We fight to protect. There's a difference. Many species claim to fight only in defense. True. But how many species would do what we did? Take catastrophic losses to save strangers? Charge into hopeless battles because retreating meant abandoning civilians? We don't just say we value life. We prove it with our actions, even when those actions cost us dearly." She looked at him directly. "Your people are deciding whether to ally with us. Here's what you should tell them. Humanity will be the best ally they ever have. We'll stand beside them in any fight. We'll share our technology and resources. We'll bleed for their people just like we bleed for our own. But they need to understand something. The loyalty we offer comes with expectations. We don't abandon our allies. We don't calculate acceptable losses. We don't retreat when things get hard. And we expect the same from those who stand with us. That seems demanding. It is. But that's the price of alliance with humanity. We give everything, and we expect our allies to do the same. After she left, Jake approached with what appeared to be a small medal. The crew wanted you to have this. It's an honorary recognition. You stood with us during the battle, even when you thought we were being suicidal. That takes courage. Kelthrix examined the medal. It was simple, just a ribbon and a small metal disc. But the gesture behind it was profound. I merely observed. I did not fight. You were there. You witnessed it. And now you're going to tell others what happened here. That makes you part of this story. Jake smiled. Besides, you helped carry wounded after the battle. That counts for something. The next day, Kelthrix prepared to return to Valoran space. His transport was ready, and he had completed his observations. But before leaving, he requested one final meeting with Captain Hayes. They met in her office, a small room with windows overlooking the planet below. Transport ships continued to ferry supplies to the surface, beginning the long process of rebuilding what the swarm had damaged. I want to thank you for your hospitality, Kelthrix said formally. You're welcome. Though I'm curious what you'll tell your government about us. Kelthrix pulled out his data tablet, showing her the final report. I am recommending full alliance with humanity, complete military cooperation, technology sharing, and joint command structures. I am also recommending that the Valoran Empire take significant steps to ensure we never become humanity's enemy. Lisa read the report with growing surprise. That's quite an endorsement. It is the logical conclusion based on my observations. Your species is capable of remarkable violence when protecting those you care about. The swarm outnumbered and outgunned you, yet you broke them. You made them feel fear for the first time in their existence. If humans can do that while fighting to protect strangers, what would you become if someone threatened humanity directly? He paused, choosing his words carefully. I have seen ancient species flee to dark space when humanity began expanding. I used to think they were cowards. Now I understand. They were not fleeing from human aggression. They were fleeing from the possibility of human aggression. They understood something that most young species do not. Humanity is not dangerous because you want to conquer. You are dangerous because you have the capacity for unlimited violence in service of protection. That makes you unpredictable and terrifying. Lisa set down the tablet. So you're afraid of us? Yes, Kelthrix admitted, but I also respect you, and I understand that the galaxy has two choices when it comes to humanity. Stand with you or stand aside. Standing against you would be suicide. That's remarkably honest. It is also accurate. I have spent weeks studying human behavior. I have watched you fight, mourn, celebrate, and endure. I have seen compassion and violence existing side by side in your species. You are contradictions made flesh. Logical yet emotional. Gentle yet fierce. Individuals yet profoundly connected to each other. You should not work as a species. Yet you not only work, you thrive. He stood to leave. I will tell my government that humanity should receive whatever alliance terms you request. I will tell them that humans make terrible enemies and exceptional friends. And I will tell them that the stars tremble, not because humanity is monstrous, but because you are capable of becoming monsters to protect what you love. Lisa stood and offered her hand in the human gesture of farewell. Kelthrix gripped it firmly. Thank you for showing me what humanity truly means. I came here expecting to observe primitive warriors. Instead, I found something far more profound. And what's that? Hope, Kelthrix said simply. In a galaxy filled with species that have grown cynical and calculating, humanity still believes that every life matters. You still fight for strangers. You still carry your dead with honor. You still choose the hard path when the easy path would cost innocent lives. That gives me hope that maybe, with humanity as our ally, we can build a better galaxy for everyone." He returned to his transport and departed from human space. During the long journey home, he refined his report, adding details and observations. He knew his recommendations would cause debate among the Valoran leadership. Some would call him too influenced by emotion, too impressed by human propaganda. But Kelthrix had witnessed the truth with his own sensors. He had seen humans charge into impossible battles and emerge victorious. He had watched them break an enemy that had never known defeat. He had observed them mourn their fallen while celebrating the lives they saved. Most importantly, he understood why ancient species spoke of humanity in hushed, fearful tones. Not because humans were cruel or aggressive, but because they possessed something that most species had lost over millennia of civilization. They still believed in sacrifice. They still fought for principles over profit. They still valued every single life, even when calculation suggested some lives were acceptable losses. The galaxy trembled when humanity charged into battle, not because they feared human weapons or human tactics. They trembled because humans fought with something more powerful than any technology. They fought with love for their comrades, their families, their species, and even for strangers they had never met. That love, transformed into protective fury, made humanity the most dangerous species in the known galaxy. And Kelthrix would spend the rest of his days ensuring that the Valoran Empire stood firmly on humanity's side, because standing anywhere else would be the greatest mistake his people could ever make. Rond emotions into weapons, because they valued every single life, even when logic said some lives were acceptable losses. The galaxy had created the Swarm to be the perfect military force, coordinated, logical, willing to sacrifice anything for victory, and humans had beaten them by being the exact opposite, chaotic, emotional, unwilling to sacrifice anyone unless absolutely necessary. Kelthrix looked at his notes and realized something that made his sensors twitch with fear. If humans were this dangerous fighting for others, what would they become if someone threatened humanity itself? What would they do if someone pushed them past the point where mercy and compassion could survive? He added a final note to his report. A warning. A recommendation. The Valoran Empire should accept whatever alliance terms humanity offered. They should support humans in every conflict. They should build bonds of friendship and trust as strong as possible. Because the alternative, making humans into enemies, was too terrifying to contemplate. Or what they were planning. The humans were going to ram the swarm fleet. All of them. Every ship would become a weapon, crashing into the enemy with everything they had left. "You cannot do this," Kelthrix said. "This is mass suicide." Lisa looked at him, and for the first time, Kelthrix saw the full intensity of human determination. "This is what we do. We fight until there's nothing left, and then we keep fighting anyway." The swarm fleet closed in, unaware that the humans they were about to destroy had just become far more dangerous than any weapon in the galaxy. Who can be saved is safe. Kelthrix made notes in his report, but he found himself struggling to describe what he had seen. How could he explain to High Command that humans won through what appeared to be controlled insanity? The door to the bridge opened, and several Marines entered, still wearing their combat armor. Sergeant Katie Palmer removed her helmet, revealing a young face streaked with dirt and sweat. "Captain," she said, "wanted to report that all civilians are secure and receiving care. The Marines are asking permission to attend memorial services for the fallen." "Granted," Lisa said. "And Katie? Good work down there." After the Marines left, Jake turned to Kelthrix again. "Still think we're too emotional for military service?" Kelthrix did not answer immediately. He was beginning to realize that his initial assessment had been dangerously incomplete. These humans did not fight despite their emotions. They fought because of them. And that made them far more dangerous than he had imagined. After Jake left, Kelthrick sat at the desk and began his formal report. He noted the casual discipline, the emotional attachments between soldiers, and the apparent eagerness for battle. All of it seemed inefficient and dangerous. He had studied 17 different military forces during his career. None of them behaved like humans. None of them kept photos of their dead. None of them seemed to treat warfare as a personal matter rather than a strategic necessity. The Valoran Empire needed allies against the Crithian swarm, that much was certain. Whether these emotional, reckless humans would be useful or merely unpredictable remained to be seen. His data tablet chimed with an alert. Crithian vessels had been detected entering the Halcyon system. The swarm was making its move. Kelthrick saved his report and stood. It was time to see if human reputation matched reality. Somewhere in the station, alarms began to sound. The humans were going to war, and Kelthricks would witness it firsthand.